Welcome back to Real Roots Radio. It is my honor and pleasure to be chatting with the one, the only Mr. Ray Benson of Asleep at the Wheel on Real Roots Radio today. How you doing, Mr. Benson?
Hey Daniel, how you doing today? Doing good, thank you. Just got out of the pool.
Over half a hundred years of Asleep at the Wheel, 55 years to be exact, but half a century has been spent in the Lone Star State. This is your guys' 50th anniversary of relocating the band to Texas. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
You're originally from Pennsylvania. The band started in Paw Paw, West Virginia. Why the move to Texas 50 years ago, and how significant was that for Asleep at the Wheel?
Well, we went out to California and got a record deal. Commander Cody had invited us out, and then Van Morrison actually mentioned us in Rolling Stone, and so it was like, oh my gosh, and so we put the record out and headed to Texas, and we met Willie Nelson and Willie and Doug Somm from the Sir Douglas Quintet, and both of them, especially Willie, said, you need to be in Texas and I'll put you on shows. I went, well, now you got to remember 1972, 73, Willie we were playing honky tonks and everything. And of course, then in the middle 70s, 80s, Willie blew up to what Willie is right now. And so why wouldn't we go to Texas? When Willie Nelson invites you.
In the roaring 70s, country music had so much going on, and a lot of it was centered around Austin, Texas. They were kind of the almost the headquarters of that outlaw movement, especially the Armadillo World headquarters. What about Austin, Texas in particular was so exciting in the early 70s for music makers like yourself?
Yeah, we hit the Armadillo. We played there in February of 73, and all of us went, wow, there's a ready-made audience of young folks and older folks that loved our music, and it was just stimulating, the whole thing. There was bands on every corner. Willie was playing, like I said, we were playing small places with Willie, and then he started doing his picnics, and they started getting bigger, and so it was just so inspiring at the time. Michael Murphy was there, B.W. Stevenson, such great folks, and it was quite a scene.
What was different about the music coming out of Austin, Texas at that time compared to, a place like Nashville, Tennessee?
Well, Nashville, you had session players, the best, some of the greatest musicians in the world. But they were playing. We were about bands. Every band in Austin was different. It was different, and they had their own sound, their own songs, and it was more like a counterculture. There were no record companies down here. There was no publishing companies. It was all just by the seat of our pants, do it yourself kind of thing. And the Pied Piper was Willie. So it was a very creative time, very creative. There were and then of course for Asleep at the Wheel, we had that part going, but we also were playing all the what we call redneck dance halls. And so we were able to split our time between the two, and really, it was a very creative time.
Hey, you mentioned not having, publishing companies and record executives hanging around. What sort of freedom did that give you guys in Austin to kind of carve out your own musical paths?
Exactly that. It was like we, it was this. Well, it was the end of the hippie era too. So we had sort of some of those ethos and whatnot, and so it was a real community too. Things would go bad, and or somebody would have a problem, and we'd all jump to help with it, whether it was benefits, whatnot. Somebody, and so it was like, we were all in this together, and so it's very different. And it kind of morphed into that. All of a sudden, Nashville got a hold of the outlaw concept. We never thought of ourselves as outlaws. We were just breaking laws.
You mentioned playing those dance halls in Texas. Of course, it was in those dance halls that Western swing really was found its home with Bob Wills. Uh, Growing up in Pennsylvania, how did you first get introduced to Western swing, and what about it, made you want to pursue it as a passion for the rest of your life?
Well, I collected 78 RPM records, and I had to found this Bob Wills record called Brain Cloudy Blues, and I went, wow. Now, I had played through high school. I played in the jazz bands, the swing band. I played upright bass. I played tuba in the march. I just wanted to, I sang in the choirs. And here was this music. I had also played a lot of square dances. That's why I fell in love with fiddle music. So I had these two opposite, what would be perceived as opposite, jazz, swing music, and fiddle music. And here was this guy putting them all together. And I was like, oh, wow, this is it. I loved country music and had great successes in country music, but this enabled us to stretch out musically. And I also love blues, Chicago blues, country blues, Robert Johnson, etc. And all of that was wrapped up in country music and in Western swing music. And also I got to wear a cowboy hat.
Everybody likes that, right?
All right. It's like I say, golly, I get to dress up like Gene Autry and Roy Rogers and still play this really challenging and great music.
What was it like for you guys bringing, kind of, there was Commander Cody and Asleep at the Wheel that were really kind of bringing Western swing back in vogue at a time where it had maybe kind of fallen by the wayside when you guys were, showing up with your cowboy hats and your brand of Western swing to some of these bars and honky tonks and playing to younger audiences, like you said, on the back end of the hippie movement that maybe might not have been as familiar with that style. What was the reaction like, and what did that mean for you guys to kind of see how it was being brought back by you and your contemporaries?
Well, for the folks who didn't have hadn't known about this, it was like, what the hell is that? Whatever it is, I don't know, but I like it. But they had no idea because they just hadn't been reading books about it, but they were coming to see this funny name band. The older folks were just amazing, especially the older musicians. They would all come out in the early 70s and going, I can't believe you're doing this. We're so thankful. This is because a lot of these guys all said when Elvis came in 1956, 57, it was a huge hit. He said every fiddle player had to learn how to play the guitar because nobody wanted to fiddle anymore. And literally, they were out of business. When we hit Texas in 73, we said, where can we go see one of those great Western swing bands? They went, there's these guys, the River Road Boys. They were wonderful. So we went. These were legendary Western swing players, but they were playing the radio hits, because that's what they were hired to do in that dance hall. So it was kind of, we helped to bring. Merle Haggard was the first one. Merle started playing in 1970 when he did the tribute to Bob Wills record, and both myself and George Strait and so many young musicians, gathered around that album. And that's where it all started, with Merle bringing back that and then us all following through.
The new album, Riding High in Texas, celebrates your 50 years in the Lone Star State. Why was it so important for you to release this album celebrate? We had the Half a Hundred Years album that came out a few years ago that was fantastic. Why was it important to do an album celebrating your golden anniversary in the Lone Star State?
I think mainly because it gave us a wide palette to choose from. Sleep at the Wheel is a Western swing band by instrumentation, but we play all kinds of music. We had a big hit on country on The Letter Johnny Walker Read was a big. Could have been Porter Wagner and Dolly Parton. We did rockabilly. We did all this stuff because it's all can be done within the context of Western swing. So it was that was our whole goal, was to play this wide variety of music, and that's what Western swing allowed us to do. It's an instrumentation: fiddles, steel guitar, not pedal steel guitar, piano, bass, drums, guitar, and a few horns maybe. And that was that's what we wanted to do.
The new album, Riding High in Texas, so many great songs celebrating the Lone Star State. And you're right, you applied your brand of Western swing to a variety of songs, including, T for Texas, kind of like the OG country song from Jimmy Rogers, and you got Still a Lot of Love in San Antonio from Daryl McCall, All My Exes Live in Texas from George Strait, Texas Cooking from Guy Clark, and so many more. But when applied to the context of Western swing, like you guys have made for 55 years, it kind of comes together in a cohesive album. How challenging was it drawing some of these songs from different sources and making it all fit together in this unique project?
Well, we didn't think about it that way. We sort of just said, let's record all this. Let's record all this and see what happens. Luckily, it just all worked. We got done with it. And we said, what, and that was basically it. Because from Texas Cooking to the Beaumont Rag, the fiddle tune that's on the thing. I mean, that's like 90 years of music, and they're so different. But that's what I want to say. Look, we play a lot of stuff. The horns and everything on Texas Cooking could be done by James Brown, for crying out loud. It's a groove that I always loved. But we did it, and it works because of the context of the material. The same thing is that eclecticism has always been our go-to thing. So I didn't want every cut to sound the same. I didn't want to, in terms of genre, like I said, this is what I have, look at my record collection. It's wild, so I wanted to be like that.
You brought in some cool special guests on this album. Lyle Lovett, you have collaborated with Lyle several times over the years, but talented newcomers Brennan Lee and Billy Strings make appearances on this project as well. That's the first time you've recorded with Billy on one of your albums, and I know you backed Brennan Lee on her great Western Swing album from a few years ago, but this is the first time that she appeared on one of your projects, correct?
Yeah. She's just amazing. That gal is a songwriter, singer, guitar player, and golly, I mean, she's just so great. And that song is a song that she knows well from Hazel Dickens. Yes, it's a Carter family song, but she had the Hazel Dickens version is kind of like what we took off on, and she's lived that basically. I mean, in terms of being a fan, so that was simple. And she was, like I say, she's a good friend and lives close by. And Billy, I met him many years ago. I produced a record on Jake Shimabukuro, the great ukulele player, and that's how I met Billy. And we became friends. And then I appeared in his 10-minute video of 10 weeks in county, I think it's called. It's like a Clint Eastwood knockoff.
7
weeks in county, and I played his cellmate. He said, the cellmate. And so while so you're sitting around for 2 days. I said, hey, Billy, I'll do this, but could you play guitar on the record? He said, sure. Listen, Billy Strings is as special a guy as I've ever known. I mean, he is not only a virtuoso on his instrument, and he's not only drawing hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people into bluegrass and traditional country music that might not know what the hell it was talking about if it weren't for him. He's also the real deal. In other words, when he came to town, he played for 8,000 people at a show, and then went down to the local bluegrass joint and jammed with a local band, because that's where it's at. That's the reality, and he's the coolest.
I have a background in the world of bluegrass, and we saw that firsthand a few weeks ago. IBMA's World of Bluegrass event, it was in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and Billy delivered the keynote, but he hung out all week. He kept making pop-up performances in the convention center. He popped by our radio station's booth for an impromptu performance because he wanted to sing one with Paul Williams of the Bluegrass Music Hall of Fame. And he's such a student of bluegrass and country music traditions. So it's exciting to see someone that's on the cutting edge, but still knows so much about the history and the roots of these genres of music.
Yeah, we had played in Chattanooga about 6 months before the IBMA, and I gave a call to my friends in Raleigh. Said, boy, you guys sure screwed up by losing this, because Chattanooga is really a vibrant place now. That we had a wonderful show there, and of course we worked up Chattanooga Choo Choo, and the place went wild.
Just a few blocks from the train itself, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it was my first time visiting Chattanooga. I loved it. It was a really cool city, and they really rolled out the red carpet for bluegrass fans for World of Bluegrass.
Yeah, there's a
Uh,
great place there called Lake Winnipesaukee, which is a homegrown amusement park. I played it 30 years ago, and I heard it was still there.
Asleep at the Wheel, of course, Ray, you've had so many great musicians and singers in your band over the years, and you always do a great job, showcasing them and letting them shine. You do that again in the new album, and I saw you on the road in Cincinnati back in January. Same thing. You let the band shine at Memorial Hall. Why don't you tell us about your new fiddle player, Ian Stewart, because he really steps out on this new album.
Yeah, I needed a fiddle player, so one of my old fiddle players, Danny Levin, said, and he worked on the album with us. And he and I grew up together. And I said, I need a fiddler. He said, I got your guy. He's been playing around town, and he's really paid his dues and learned the ropes. And so I said, okay, great. Turned out, literally, he grew up down the street. I'm sitting in my house. He grew up down the street from me. I had no idea. And so anyway, so he comes in and starts playing fiddle, and I said, you sing? He said, yeah. I said, we'll work up a song or two, you know. And from that start to it, a little about almost 3 years ago, I saw the talent that was there, and I went, oh, great, man. I'm all for that. That's what this band's all about. I mean, sure, I'm the band leader, and I'm probably the best known, obviously, but no, the folks that have been in the band have been legendary. I mean, Tony Garnier's been with Dylan for 35 years, on bass. I started him out when he was 18. Junior Brown was in the band. Jan Brown, Larry Franklin's played on 100 records in Nashville, and it's just Lucky Ocean. He lives in Perth or Fremantle, Australia, and he's the leading steel guitar player in Australia, among other things. It's just been wonderful. It's always something that I've always wanted to do in terms of, I always felt like, the kind of, I don't know, the tradition of the Bob Wills band, of the Count Basie band, all the big bands. That's the way you did it. You featured guys. You give them the platform, and it's only helps you.
Well, and that's one thing you mentioned that was unique about the era in which Sleep at the Wheel really kind of honed its chops in the early '70s was different about the Austin scene versus the Nashville scene, where they had the session pickers, and then maybe they would pick up a band or pick up road musicians to travel. With the Sleep at the Wheel being such a band's band, both on the road and in the studio, same pickers. It really provides a unique platform for people that pass through the band, past and present.
Yeah, and it's a tradition, basically. It's what it is, and it's also about a review. What we said when we started the band, we said, okay, we're going to have a number of singers. It's not just one singer, and I'll tell you what, it's commercially it probably worked against us because the record would come out in the '70s, and we had three lead singers, and so all of a sudden we have a hit with Chris, the gal singer, and me singing. And then the next one was Leroy, and they're going, "Wait a minute, that's not Asleep at the Wheel." Oh my gosh, what is? So commercially, it was a mistake, but artistically, it's what we were all about.
Well, hey, if it worked for Bob Wills, he had Tommy Duncan doing all that great singing, even though he was the band leader. Hey, it can work for Asleep at the Wheel, right?
Yeah, and then when Tommy left, he had 4 or 5 other great singers, like I say. So that was what we figured we'd do, and of course, I was always fighting the establishment. That's where the outlaw thing came in. It was like we're really fighting the establishment by saying no, we're doing it our way, and if we have to suffer the consequences of not having a string of hit records, well, that's okay. We're here to play music every night, on the road in front of people. That's the traveling musician to me is a tradition that is so important to the vitality of any music because they say when you going on tour, I go, yeah, because yeah, we are on tour, but we don't. It's not like New York, Chicago, L.A., Dallas. We just played in Gun Barrel, Texas the other day. We play in small towns and big towns. We take the music to the people.
Asleep at the wheel, 55 years. You mentioned you guys making your own decisions and kind of balking at decisions that people tried to make for you, whether that is focusing on one particular singer or other sorts of creative decisions. Now that 55 years later, how much more rewarding is it to look back on your legacy and know that you called your own shots versus letting someone else make decisions for you?
Yeah, I feel great about it because I don't have a lot of regrets. You know, I have a lot of missteps. That were decisions that you made that perhaps didn't lead down to where you wanted, but it's all built upon, everything is to the present, and so that's important to me because most people in my position and my age don't have a lot to look forward to. I got every day. I got new stuff to think about. I got to practice. I got to work. I got to figure out new things, and that to me is what life's all about.
Mr. Benson, it's been an absolute treasure and a thrill to have you on the air today. Where can folks go to see your always evolving and always growing tour schedule? Because I mean, folks got to see Asleep at the Wheel live. If you haven't done it, you got to make sure you fix that. My wife and I went on a date night to see you guys in Cincinnati earlier this year. It was absolute blast. Always is. Where can folks go to see your tour schedule and keep up with where you're going to be next?
Well, the website, I guess, is the best. Sleepatthewheel.com is always got that information. The Facebook, and then we'll post on all of the social media stuff, Instagram, etc., on a weekly basis, so the people can find out. But definitely those places, and you know, that's what I have people say. Oh my gosh, the older people especially. Oh, where can I find you? I said, have you heard of this thing called the internet? Just type our name up in that Google thing, and you're going to be amazed what you find. And that's really the case. You're from Cincinnati.
I'm from closer to Dayton, but yeah,
Yeah.
I go down to Cincinnati for concerts all the time.
I went to Antioch College for a year.
My parents have the same zip code as Antioch. I live in Cedarville, Ohio, not far
Oh
from
yeah.
Yellow Springs at all. So, yeah.
That's where I made a lot of great friends there, and that's where I started. I bought my first bottle of whiskey in Xenia, and
That's where our radio station studios are. That's where I'm sitting right now is in Xenia.
is
So.
that right? Oh my. Yeah, that was before the tornado. I mean, I know quite a bit about Southern Ohio, and we would go into my first recording ever in 1969. They needed a guitar player and a tuba player. I played tuba in high school, and we went into Mount Healthy. You know where that is, right? Mount Healthy, Ohio, and it was Rusty York's studio. He was a legendary guy, and that's where I did my first recording. And of course, I was good friends with Lonnie Mack, who was from around there. We became
whale of a guitar player.
One of the greatest, and he was a good friend. And so Southern Ohio was good, and so many of the great country guys. Johnny Paycheck's from Southern Ohio. There were some great musicians that were in Nashville, but they were all from Ohio. And I used to go in and see Earl Taylor and the Stony Mountain Boys at the Terrace. I think it was called the Terrace Club. And my cousin, I had a cousin from Cincinnati, and he was a stock boy at King Records. And I just saw a wonderful documentary on PBS about King Records, and I collect 78s. I've got over 20,000 45 78s, and my King Records are still the most treasured. I do a radio show on Willie's Roadhouse on Sirius XM. I just played a bunch of Delmore Brothers and explained to the listening audience all about how great the King Records story is and how important it is. And I had family in Cincinnati. We would go there in the 50s. It was the first place I saw a big boy, the
Yeah.
big boy burger.
Frisch's, yeah.
Frisch's Big Boy. And then as a kid, in the 50s, that was like, whoa, wow, man, that was something. And and then we used to play, across into Kentucky, Covington.
Yeah, Covington, yep.
There was that nice theater there we used to play. That's no more,
Man, you mentioned seeing great bluegrass in the bars and honky tonks in Dayton and Cincinnati. There's a good chance you saw my grandpa, he was a fiddle player who's in the Bluegrass Music Hall of Fame, called Paul Moon Mullins. He was a broadcaster on WPFB out of Middletown, but played fiddle with Earl Taylor and Jim McCall and
He was
Benny
Moon
Birch.
Mullins. The Moon Mullins was your uncle.
My papa, yeah, my grandfather.
Your grandpa. Wow. Oh yeah, sure. That's a common name when you talk about bluegrass. Yeah, it was big deal. Well, everybody seems to forget that Cincinnati is in Kentucky, really.
Yeah, yeah, yep. And you mentioned Antioch College. Of course, the Osborne brothers grew up in the Dayton area, and they performed the first bluegrass concert on a college campus was at Antioch in Yellow Springs with Bobby and Sonny the Osborne brothers. It's first.
I did not know that. I went to Japan with them on a tour one time. They were the greatest. Oh, when they would sing Ruby, the Japanese revered them. And yeah, and Bobby, oh my God, what a voice! They were my favorite. Bluegrass. When I was growing up, I didn't get the Opry, but we did get WWVA from Wheeling,
Yeah,
and that was the first that kind of country music that I heard. And it's that whole axis between and the some Les Paul, was from New Jersey and thing, but he had a country group that called Rhubarb Red. And they would play down you just go west of Philly a little bit, and of course Del McCoury lives in Pennsylvania.
yeah.
Me and Del talk about that all the time. I said we used to go down to the Sundown Ranch, I think it was called. We played there with Kitty Wells one time many years ago, and I was so fortunate in the early '70s to at least get the last bit of that kind of country music history.
Asleepatthewheel.com for the tour schedule, so you can purchase the new album Riding High in Texas. Of course, it's available on all the digital streaming platforms as well. It's an absolute thrill, celebrating 5 decades of Asleep at the Wheel in the Lone Star State of Texas. Mr. Ray Benson, thank you so much for joining us on Real Roots Radio today.
Thank you, Daniel.